Good afternoon. Today's the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. We need to do an ethics assignment before the end of the semester. I made it live on Canvas already, but I just want to explain it a little bit, try and make it as straightforward as possible, and give you a chance to work on it over the holidays if that's what you want to do. So for the remainder of this video, I'm going to just share my screen and go through some sources and talk about what you can do for the assignment. Okay, so you'll find this file on Canvas in the assignments folder. We're in the middle of a pandemic. It looks like we're going to go back into lockdown right now. There are a number of restrictions related to Thanksgiving gatherings and things like that. And we also have a vaccine that will soon be available, it sounds like. So I think there's a number of ethical things that we could discuss there for the ethics assignment, and hopefully it'll be useful and maybe help you make some sense of what's going on with those things. So, reading through the file, I've selected, or I found on this website right here, several ethical topics related to the COVID epidemic. So, this organization is managed by the World Health Organization, and they've identified some ethical 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 questions related to the pandemic. Here's the list. This is the list that I copied into the Word file, and then there are articles here. If you click on COVID-19, it restricts it to COVID-related articles. Of course, you're free to browse these if you need some inspiration, or you can use other sources in the regular media. So the idea for this assignment is essentially fill 1 to 2 pages of text. You can discuss one ethical dilemma related to the pandemic, or you can discuss a few, or you can discuss several that are interrelated. I'm going to leave it up to you. So in each case where there's an ethical dilemma, there's a public health concern, and then there are trade-offs associated with the measures that we are using to address the public health concern. And that's what I'd like you to take a look at. Identify a public health issue, identify the measures that are being proposed, either by the government or corporations or whatever other entities, and then discuss the ethical concerns of those measures. Earlier in the semester, we talked about several different schools of thought: deontology, utilitarianism, consequentialism, and rights. Incorporate those ethical schools of thought into your submission. You do not necessarily have to explicitly identify the school of thought. You do not have to necessarily mention deontology or utilitarianism. You can if you want, but you don't have to. But keep those in mind. So deontology is doing your duty and obeying rules and laws. There are plenty of examples there. Utilitarianism is balancing good versus bad. And consequentialism is valuing the outcome over the methods. So the end justifies the means. And then there's the rights-based approach. In the United States, that's primarily the Constitution. So you can use that as a reference as well. Looking for 1 to 2 pages, single-spaced. I think 1 page, you should have at least 1 page. This probably would be necessary, and probably 2 to 3 paragraphs. So I gave some examples here. Universal mask wearing is thought to help slow the spread of the virus that causes COVID-19, but the American Constitution does not grant the federal government the power to mandate universal use of personal protective equipment. A possible path forward could be. I'm doing this briefly here just to give you an example. If you're doing the assignment on this topic, for example, you would want to talk about why universal mask wearing is thought to help slow the spread. You probably want to reference some type of research or studies that document this. If you read the research and you're not convinced by the research, then you can say that. Again, thinking for yourself is the most important thing. I'm not asking you to look for and find sources that support your conclusion already. If you have a conclusion and you have an opinion, and the sources you find do not support your opinion, then dispute the sources. Okay? With mask wearing, I think that's definitely possible. Here's another example. Operation Warp Speed accelerated the development of a vaccine for COVID-19, but there is substantial resistance among the public to use any vaccines, particularly one developed so quickly, and the new vaccine is associated with serious side effects. Therefore, okay, even before the pandemic, there was a substantial number of Americans who resisted vaccinating their children for anything. There are people who don't want their kids to be vaccinated for anything at all. Okay, that was before the pandemic. I think it's reasonable to conclude that those same people will definitely not be on board with giving their kids or themselves a vaccine that was developed within such a short period of time. But a vaccine could be part of an overall solution. So how might we mitigate those people's concerns? I don't think it would be wise, as personal opinion, I don't think it would be wise to simply dismiss those people's concerns. I think we should find a way to address them. That could be done in different ways, convincing them or developing herd immunity for the rest of the population, whatever your thoughts are. So here's some additional sources. This one is from CNN. Most coronavirus cases are spread by people without symptoms, CDC now says. I did look into this article and I looked into some of the sources that the article cited. I found many qualifiers in there. And just using my own thought process, it's very difficult for me to understand how they can know that asymptomatic people now spread, that most coronavirus cases are spread by asymptomatic people. What is this garbage? Sorry about that. Okay. So yeah, just using logic, I do not understand, personally do not understand how we can know that most cases are spread by people without symptoms. Okay, they're saying the majority of cases are spread by people without symptoms. Well, how would you know that? What kind of test would you need to do? What kind of experiment would you need to set in order to determine that? That would be a question that I would have. And reading the article and looking at one or two of the sources that they cite, I'm also not convinced. So you may disagree with me, and you're free to say that. Okay, here's another one. COVID in the meatpacking industry. Plagued by COVID-19 outbreaks, the meatpacking industry could be forced to change under Biden. They provide some data here. More than 42,000 workers were infected and 221 were killed. For me to know, I am not willing to simply trust USA Today and assume that 42,000 workers infected and 221 killed is something to be overly concerned about. I would want to know, do these numbers represent a significant jump over the infection and the death rate of the general population? If it turns out, comparing meatpacking data to data of the general population, if it turns out that the meatpackers are suffering more, then I can see that would be a problem. If you run the numbers and it turns out that their rates of infection and death are equivalent or even lower than the general population, then that would be something we'd want to know. The article does not do that. That would be something you'd have to do on your own. I have done it and I've drawn my own conclusions, but I'll leave that up to you. So that could be that could be a serious ethical concern. I mean, we need food. We cannot simply shut down the food industry because the workers are getting infected. We have to find a solution where the workers can work as safely as possible, but that people get the food they need. So I see that as an ethical dilemma. New York governor wants to ruin Thanksgiving. That's my summary. Showing my biases there, perhaps. Governor Cuomo blasts police for saying they will not enforce Thanksgiving gathering limits. I do not believe that person is a law enforcement officer. So the governor has put a 10-person cap on private gatherings. A number of sheriffs in Western New York told residents they will not enforce the state's gathering. The governor responded, I do not believe that person is a law enforcement officer. So there's a dispute there between the governor and law enforcement. So the law enforcement, I assume, takes some type of oath to uphold the laws of the state. They probably take an oath to the Constitution, the New York Constitution and the American. I see an ethical dilemma there. Should law enforcement enforce the state's 10 cap limit? And what would be a possible way to resolve that ethical dilemma? That's another thing you might want to look at. Okay, moving on. Joe wants mask mandate, referring to Mr. Biden. Biden wants mask mandate in every state to fight coronavirus, but these governors won't commit. Okay, another dispute about regulations and laws related to, I don't even know if they're laws, if they've actually passed the law, or if these are just governor decrees. President-elect Joe Biden has laid out several ways to combat the coronavirus at the beginning of his term, including working with state and local leaders to enact a national mask mandate. But for now, not every state has committed to help. Okay, that does imply a constitutional problem there. He wants a national mask mandate, but he wants to work with local and state leaders. Well, if he wants a national mask mandate and he's the president, why can't he just enact a national mask mandate? I assume it's because the Constitution does not give him the power as president to do that for the entire country, and that's why he would work with state and local leaders. But if the state and local leaders, who are also elected, do not commit to help, there's a constitutional dilemma. Okay. Yeah, so plenty of room there for ethical concerns. Here's one about the Australian airline Qantas. Vaccine will be required to fly, says Qantas chief. The Australian flag carrier's boss, Alan Joyce, said the move would be a necessity when vaccines are available. I think that's going to be a common thing talking to my colleagues in other airlines around the world. Mr. Joyce said Qantas was looking at ways of changing its terms and conditions for international travelers as the industry, which has been hit hard by travel restrictions, looks at ways of moving forward. We will ask people to have a vaccination before they can get on the aircraft. For international visitors coming out and people leaving the country, we think that's a necessity. So you will not be able to fly on Qantas, which would make it exceptionally difficult to get to Australia if you do not have a vaccine. So that I see many ethical problems with that. Let's look at the next article. No walk in the park. The vaccine is described as no walk in the park. The CDC must be transparent about the side effects people may experience after getting their first shot of coronavirus, and doctors urged during a meeting Monday with CDC advisors. The vaccine requires 2 doses, and Dr. Freihofer worries whether her patients will come back for a second dose because of potentially unpleasant side effects after the first shot. Both companies acknowledge their vaccine could induce side effects that are similar to symptoms associated with mild COVID-19, such as muscle pain, chills, and headache. Okay, so that could play into the Qantas policy of requiring a vaccine. Is it ethical for Qantas to require a vaccine to fly in their airplanes when that vaccine can induce muscle pains, chills, and headache? A lot to think about there. Here's something about tracking, contact tracing. Got a problem here? Okay, this link appears to not be working. Sorry about that. We can probably find other sources. The article, going by my memory, um, described the possible use of phone apps that would track people's movements and alert you if you come into contact with someone who had tested positive for COVID-19. There could be privacy issues there as a starter. And this one falls into the tin foil hat category, perhaps, probably, hopefully. This is an interview with a doctor. I did a little bit of due diligence on her. She does appear to be a respected doctor. And she has some pretty wild claims about the COVID vaccine. She relates it to 5G. There's some really crazy things in there. It's 36 minutes long. I'm not going to look at it now. Yeah, what she's basically saying is that the COVID vaccine could turn us into 5G antennas. She claims that there will be nanobots inside the vaccine and will allow people, or authorities or whoever or companies to identify us simply because we have these nanobots inside us that were introduced in the vaccine. It sounds crazy. But, I think it's, as free thinking people, I think we should even listen to the crazy stuff. I don't know what else to say about it. I'll let you watch that at your own discretion. Yeah, so back to the assignment. 1 to 2 pages total. Essentially, make the text cohesive, no matter how you choose to do it. If you choose to focus your 1 to 2 pages exclusively on one ethical dilemma, make the text cohesive from beginning to end. If you choose to talk about several ethical dilemmas which may be interrelated, use transitional techniques to move from one topic to another, not just separate paragraphs. So it reads something like an opinion piece in a news magazine, for example. If anybody has any questions on that, I will be around. Except for Thanksgiving, I should be here, so feel free to hit me up. The due date is December 7th. As always, I'm not particularly concerned about exactly getting them on the due dates, but I wanted to give you the heads up on this, so if you want to work on it over the break, you've got the information to do it. So stay in touch, let me know if you need any help, and see you guys after Thanksgiving.